Wordless method, based upon how many times it occurs. The words it occurs more than 2,200 times. There are going to be a few words there. Okay. And then you go down to 1,000 times, 500 times, etc., etc. Until you finally get down to 10, I think, as far as it goes. And then you're on your own from then on out. Okay. For the 1 and 2s. Okay. So that's helpful if you're just working on lists, on words. But frankly, as I told you, for me, just memorizing words and lists was really the best way for me to go. Forced memory method, I used to use this one. This was beneficial. Had a little lexicon I would carry, Langenscheid. I don't know if you remember Langenscheid's little yellow lexicon, Hebrew lexicon. Very nice. But every time I didn't know a word, I had to look it up. Of course, that gets a little frustrating when you have to look up the same word, in the space of 20 minutes. The thing is about it, though, that I've discovered that when I look it up, you get the range of meaning there. You see. So you glance through the range of meaning, and you have to decide which meaning you're going to associate. Well, sooner or later you're going to remember the word, you want to look it up, but you're also going to have some grasp of the range of meanings. Reader's lexicon, we talked about that before, and here's the one that you don't have, but now it seems to be a biggie for a lot of people now. Morphologically tagged method, where you get libronics. You just put your little cursor on it and it tells you what it is, right? Or it parses it for you. You click on it and it tells you what it is. Dictionary. So that's, of course, helpful, but the problem with some of this is that it's easy to get so dependent upon the tool that you don't work on remembering a word, right? And so sometimes you just gotta say, I'm going to try to read this without using it, okay, and then work on it so I can read it, okay, without doing that, okay. And sometimes morphological tag stuff is wrong. For instance, in the Grand Court, they may have fixed it now. I don't know. I haven't checked it. I haven't seen an later version. But it couldn't distinguish the conjunction key from the preposition cause. Couldn't distinguish it. Okay. So, key is always a preposition. And never a conjunction. And they may have fixed that. But I've noticed something in the Bronx too that I saw the other day, and I couldn't remember. I can't remember where it was right now. That it didn't seem to be able to distinguish something. Okay, symbols and syntax. Well, we've had the second year, or in your case, the fourth course, I guess, on syntax, so you now know all about syntax. So the key there is not I remember all that I already know. The key is I got a grasp of the range, and I know where my book is when I look it up. Okay, that's not how I have to do the same thing. Okay, but I have it, for instance, when I'm working on the exegesis stuff, I have it on my computer here, and I just bring it up and I have it in front of me. See. And the Libronics has tools too that have syntax books, a couple of syntax books. They're kind of limited, but they're there. Okay, so any questions on reading the text? It's most important, isn't it? Okay? Can't emphasize that enough. Okay, we don't want to get into the historical study stuff. Yeah, and yours, I got it in a different location. Okay. We put it in this different location. So, just from the standpoint of bibliography, there's different kind of issues with regard to historical study. One is just plain old history. So, for instance, historical survey of the Old Testament. That's just history. But that puts the Old Testament history in the context of world history, you see. So it's important to know, isn't it? I mean, it's important for us to know, especially when you're trying to interpret, let's say, Isaiah 7. What's important about Isaiah 7?
The virgin birth.
Yeah, okay, virgin birth. But the whole thing is placed in the context of a world historical series of events here. Assyrian, Ephraimite wars, right? The whole thing comes up in that context. Okay? So anyway, there's just plain old history. Okay, I mean, world history. There is specific historical issues that come up. For instance, in this Macmillan Bible Atlas, sometimes it's important to be able to see exactly the location of where an event is taking place, okay, to interpret it properly. David running around the wilderness, and Saul chasing them. Now, are they, is it kind of one of these, scenarios where they're out in the plains and one's chasing the other one, or is it, a different kind of setting? Oh, it seems to say, you see, in the text that it's in a mountainous country, okay? So, is it just one mountain and they, for some reason, they just running around and out of people's sight, or is it a different kind of a setting with all kinds of ravines and whatnot, easy to hide with caves? What kind of a place is that? You see, sometimes you need to know that kind of stuff, okay, to be able to interpret it properly. I'm remembering one passage, I forget exactly what it is now, it's coming to my mind, but where God told these people to get ready for war, but there was this water out there, and the shields and the water and the sun was utilized in blinding the oncoming army. I forget exactly, I think it was Assyria at that time, so it was battle going on. And that's how they won because the other army was blinded because of the nature of the topography and how God had set that up. Polish your shields, and all of a sudden they were blinded, and so they could get whacked apparently. So, geography of the Bible is important sometimes. Archaeology is part of it too. Okay. That's the story of the left-handed assassin trying to get killed with that king. Right? And it's in our. He's got the story in the book on Codes book. You'll see the story when you read it. But anyway, the nature of the setting, the porch, bedroom, door, all of that was important to the nature of the story. So anyway, there's just some bibliography. Now, historical studies, we need the broad thing. When we open up and study a book, we need to know the backgrounds of the book, put the book in its historical setting. But sometimes when we're in the middle of the story, and this is another aspect, you see, we didn't study it initially, but now we're interpreting the passage. Now we've got a historical situation that creeps up in the middle of the text here, and I've got to track that down, you see. So there's the broad and the narrow aspects to this historical studies. Higher critical, what I just talked about, author, setting, date, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's easy to figure out. Sometimes it's not. Okay. Also, the state of the transmission of the text. Okay. In other words, you're on a Hebrew Bible. Can we trust the Hebrew Bible at this point, or is there really some textual problems there that we need to deal with? Okay. Let me give you a rundown on that from this article here. You can read that. But I just want to give you and don't memorize this at all. In fact, this came out of a book, and I don't remember exactly what book it was in my file, and I don't remember the specific source, so I apologize for that. But the point of it is, I just want to point out something we may not be aware of here to help us out here. For instance, the various books of the Old Testament according to the Septuagint. In other words, do we need the Septuagint of the Greek Old Testament to help us with this book, or is in fact the Hebrew text better than the Septuagint kind of thing? Where is it in this respect? Well, just look at some of these examples. Okay. By the way, as a general statement, this is a generalized statement. The Pentateuch, from the standpoint of the text of the Pentateuch, it's very good. Okay, really, the Septuagint does not, what you would say, does not give us a value-added dimension to that. And one of the interesting things I was noting last time I was reading through is looking at the margins, where they have the textual problems, the Catheve Carré readings, okay? And there's almost, in the Pentateuch, there are very few Catheve Carré readings. Very few. In other words, where the Hebrews, those means that where the Hebrews recognized themselves that there was a probable error in the text, and so they put it in the margin. They didn't change the text, put it in the margin, what they thought was right. This is textual critical work, right? Okay. When you look through the Pentateuch, and you find almost no Catheve Carré readings. Okay. I thought that was rather intriguing last time I went through that. Every other book, they seem to have significant numbers there where they appear. Okay? So just a little item that I remembered last time. But here, the book of Joshua. The book of Joshua, the Masoretic text, or Hebrew Bible, has been expanded in certain sections which were later incorporated in some Septuagint recensions. Okay? So then what we're saying is that they're saying, I think, is that maybe the Septuagint may have some of the original, the more original sections in that here. Judges is in a distinct deterioration state as far as the text of the Septuagint. Okay? Right? So we wouldn't use the Septuagint as a primary tool to straighten out the Masoretic text that much. Okay? First and Second Samuel, the utmost importance for reconstruction of the now corrupt Hebrew text. So the Septuagint becomes then important for those passages. I mean, you see those books, whereas in the preceding book it wasn't that helpful. Okay, in what is this one? First and Second, these are the Kings. First and Second Kings, quite evident that in many cases the Hebrew text underlying the Septuagint was a purer one than that represented by the Masoretic text. Thank you. Great. Which means then that when we're in those books, maybe our Hebrew Bible may have more textual problems that we may adjust more. You see what I'm saying? And we typically would in some other passages. Chronicles, regarding the Chronicles, generally accepted that the value of the Septuagint lies in a large number of small details as preserve the reading of the Masoretic text. So, Ezra, Nehemiah, okay. Esther, a lot of wrong with Esther. Job, here's Job. The position with the Greek text of Job is textually interesting. As they stand, the Septuagint and Masoretic texts do not show any very fundamental deviations, but the history of the Greek text is really strange, in other words. So it's a question now whether you want to adjust the Masoretic text based upon the Septuagint. Daniel, of course, has a lot of Psalms. On the book of Psalms, Sweet says there are obvious signs of incompetence on the part of the translator. That is, in other words, in the Psalms, the Septuagint may not be the way to change the Masoretic text as much. In other words, you would look at a higher value on the Masoretic text than at the Septuagint if the variation involves the Septuagint there. Okay. We'll talk more about that kind of stuff later when we get into textual criticism. Just to show you that this is an element of historical study right at the beginning stages, isn't it? Where we simply need to know where we got to go and what kind of emphasis we're going to put on the Septuagint at that point for some of this. Okay? Isaiah here, the book presents something of an enigma. Okay? It has been shown that after the Pentateuch is one of the first books to be translated into Greek. On the other hand, it is demonstrated that the present Septuagint text places the book among those whose Greek shows obvious and signs of incompetence. Which is kind of interesting because the old was a by-standard version, that is, of 1946. This was right after they found the Dead Sea Scrolls and they began to do a lot of things. And one of the things that happened in the Revised Standard in 1946 was that they amended the Masoretic text with the Septuagint very often in Isaiah and other places, right? Only later on to realize that, gee whiz, we kind of got too enthusiastic at that point over the Dead Sea Scroll finds, the Septuagint and stuff, and so they learned later on that, gee, the Masoretic text, the Hebrew text, had better credibility than it gave it credit for, and now the new Revised Standard had reversed the old picture. So the old Revised Standard is not good. Jeremiah. Well, anyway, I don't need to go into all this. This is more text or criticism than anything else. The only thing I'm saying at this point is that, look, it's part of higher critical analysis just to know, okay, to have an awareness. In the Pentateuch, the text is good. In Isaiah, basically, the text is good, right? Okay, but, in some of those other books, the text has more problems than others. Okay? Just be aware of that. Diachronic analysis literally means through time. This is really different, in a sense, from the New Testament. The first book of the New Testament was written probably what date? Approximately. Mid-50s. Okay, mid-50s, or if you take James, be the earliest, maybe late 40s, 49 or something. Okay. And the last book was written probably when? 95, somewhere in the 90s, right? 95, something like that. So that's about approximately 50 years, right? What about some of these Old Testament books? The first book was written probably when? Somewhere around 1400 BC, right? I mean, let's just give a generalization. The last one written when? 500. 400. About 435 or so, right? Malachi, right? 430, somewhere here, right? A lot of time, a lot of history, a lot of variations, and even within books themselves, single books themselves, you got. I mean, take Chronicles, 2nd Chronicles, for instance. Starts before the dissolution, if you will, of the monolithic kingdom, and we end up in, with 2 kingdoms and all kinds of kings, all kinds of world events that occurred, right? A lot of time gone by forward at that point, right? So there's a lot of reasons to really focus in on history when we're in some of those books, just to get a feel for where in the world are we in this big historical scheme of things here. Okay? So, direct analysis through time. Here's an example of something that deals with time. Endless genealogies here. I think this is something interesting as well, if I recall right. And so I thought it was really intriguing when I first saw this. Huh? Notice, what am I at here? Oh, I had a chart somewhere along the line. I had a chart. Question is, Moses, I'm going to say, wrote the Pentateuch. Okay, put it together with the exception. There are 2 spots in the sources that he used. Okay. How did he get his information, and how accurate was the information he got recorded? Now, this would be a main argument for those who dispute the integrity of the text, of course, and the truthfulness of the text, because of the time involved. I mean, how much time are we talking about? Well, day 1, creation, to when? The entrance into the promised land. There's an awful lot of time, right? And there's an awful lot of people that's involved with that. Okay? But look at this. Genealogically, only 9 people were needed to orally transmit the historical information from Adam to Moses. Only 9 people. Adam, Methuselah, Noah, Shem, Isaac, Jacob, Levi, Kohath, Amram, Moses. And 9 were needed. Okay? If you look at, though I don't have it here, I have it on a chart someplace. If you look at the overlapping charts here, okay? Overlapping charts, for instance, Shem, who's the son of Noah, which we think real early, I mean way back then, but he overlaps, I think, about 50 years with Abraham. Which we think, that was Bruce Whitehouse, right? But they overlap. They have coffee together, I'm talking about these things, right? And I thought that was kind of intriguing. It really is something. At any rate, there's a whole lot of issues involved with this business of time. The book of Job, there's an enigma for it. Not just the interpretation of the book of Job, which itself is not real easy, but we'll get to that at some point. But Job itself, the date of Job and the events in the book indicates the patriarchal times. Okay? In other words, Abraham's time. Okay? And the patriarchs. Okay? And there's various reasons, which I won't go into all those reasons here, but here's just a few of them here. Okay? We can go into that. But there's another aspect of Job, okay? Turn as to reference there's all kinds of reasons. Of the writing. In other words, the time frame of the events appear to be patriarchal. Maybe even predating Abraham. Okay? But when was it written? When was the book written? You see, it seems that the book was written, in my conclusion at least, in the Solomonic era, which would be what date, approximately? 950, 900, right? So you got about from 900 to back up to, significant 1500 or so BC, right? Somewhere in there. So the dates and the dates of the writing and the events recorded are quite distinct. Seem to be quite distinct, which has important issues for the interpretation of the words. Okay? Because obviously in the Solomonic era you would not be using anachronistic meanings to work. Some of the words that may have been functional in Abraham prior to Abraham's day, but no longer functional in his day. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. He wouldn't be doing that. Okay? So the words themselves are contemporary, even though the events are anything but contemporary. Okay? And so that has some interpretive implications there. Anyway, notice the dates. People suggested the dates for that book to be written. From the time of Moses to the 2nd century BC. I mean, how many years is that? Yeah, that's a few years. So obviously there's some real question. Seems to me the most reasonable, examining all the data I could examine, that Solomonic era was there. Is the time of it. Now the conclusion means that the events recorded of those events in the books were separated by hundreds of years. The events in the writing are separated by hundreds of years. And oral tradition, with possible writing material, were really involved in bringing about, if you will, the book of Job. However, our doctrine of inspiration then becomes a significant issue, doesn't it? As we say, is that a problem with God? Is there a problem if the events occurred pre-Abrahamic times and it was written down to Solomon's time? Does God got a problem making sure that the accuracy was there? Well, I don't think He's got a problem with that. Okay? Inspiration says the Holy Spirit superintends the writing, right? And so you certainly can get it right. And that's what we believe, at any rate. Okay, we won't go any further. But the problem, just to illustrate the problems, some of these historical issues that occur are not easy issues. Okay? Just take here another example of the historical instance, superscription of the Psalms. Okay? Now, the superscriptions themselves were not part of the inspired text. But more and more today, more and more scholars are more and more convinced that superscriptions, though they're not part of the original inspired text, have great historical validity in it. But notice the superscription of these Psalms. I'll take one Psalm, I think, as an example. Psalm 60. Notice, I won't go into all the details of what's here now. But here's verse 1, verse 2, and then verse 3. So the Psalm itself, our Bible, verse 1, is really verse 3. Okay? And here, in the setting of this, of course, it gives a setting for this. Uninspired setting is tied to 2 Samuel 8 and 1 Chronicles 18. Okay? Okay? But the point is that we have a superscription that gives me a historical meaning. Okay? To the overshooter on 2:10, I do, let's see, by David to teach. Okay. When he went out against Syria, okay, at a particular place called Two Rivers here, and Syria of Zobah, that's a place name. Okay, and Job returned and he smote Edom in the land, in the valley of Salt. And so all of that is historical stuff that somehow is attached to this psalm. Okay? It's uninspired on one hand. On the other hand, we have to give some sort of credence to the possibility that historical background plays a part in the psalm. Now, we won't superimpose the historical setting from the superscription onto the psalm, but we'll look at the psalm to see if there's any reflection. Okay? And if there is, we can justify that. And exegetically, you see, that historical scenario can become part of our interpretation of that psalm. Okay? So it's another example where the historical stuff can become a part of the interpretation in a valid way. Okay. So, historical stuff, a lot of stuff. Contextual analysis, now we're more comfortable here. What's it say before? What does it say after? Okay, now I'm real comfortable here. Okay, well, yes, but the problem here is, let's just take an example in the prophets, for instance. He's writing within a historical context that the people know all about. All right? You don't have to explain what's going on, because they've been reading the newspaper, you see. Okay? Now he's given a prophecy with a background understood, not stated. It's in the background. It's not in the text. It's behind the text. Okay? And so his whole prophecy is related to that historical scenario. All right? So if we're just reading the words of the text, before and after, and didn't plug in the historical situation, we're not the audience. I mean, we're supposed to be like the audience. We're supposed to hear what he's saying as if we were the audience, right? And we're not. We got to delve into the historical thing, which is in the background of the statement. Okay? And some of these passages, they really get really exotic as far as the historical. Now look at the historical stuff that's related to this here. Well, we won't get into that part here. Robert, born in 770 approximately, died 688, making what? 90 years? Is that right? Or is that 110 years? I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. Okay. Let's see, let me get into the stuff on after here. Now, notice these chapters here. Chronology of the era, 2 Kings 15 to 21, 2 Chronicles 26 to 33. I mean, there's a lot of background there. Okay. So that's a lot of the background there. Let's see, I have a chart there. Yeah, now look at this. Here is 740 to 35, first 6 chapters. Right? But when you get down to the other part of the book, 701 to 680, chapters 40 to 66. So we did our historical study when we were in chapter 1. And now the whole world changed when we switched our page here. Okay, right? And so we got to redo it. You got to do it all the time when you do this book. Okay? The crisis, Syro-Ephraimic War, 734 BC. Okay? Fall of Samaria. Assyria invaded Israel very times. Here, 745, 724, 724, 22, captured in 722. There's a lot of stuff going on during that time, and a lot of the prophecies were written in different parts of that, you see. Invasion of Sennacherib, 701, says there. Anyway, there's an awful lot, there's just an awful lot of history within the book itself. Now, some books are easier than others. And we'll touch upon this part today, the book of Haggai. I mean, he dates his prophecies. 22nd day of such and such a month in a particular year, I said this, you know. So that's good. Okay, that's very helpful, right? The others aren't quite as helpful in that respect. Okay, because Isaiah doesn't keep cluing us in like that. He doesn't have to, because he's talking to people who live in those times, right? And he didn't speak this thing at 1 or 2 messages. I mean, this is a whole lifetime here of different messages at different times, right? So it becomes pretty difficult historically to deal with it. Another issue is this other one here. It must always be dealt with the underlying relationship between God and Israel, which is assumed rather than stated in most parts of the Old Testament. Covenant issues. He doesn't have to explain, oh, now, you remember you had covenant with God. You never say that. Okay? They know it. And that's the basis of his message. I mean, his preaching, his condemnation is based on that. You don't have to say, oh, you remember that covenant you signed, you know? No, you don't have to say that. Because they know it. And so his message has that as a background. Okay? Right? So it's assumed and not stated in the most part. Okay? And so if we're not thinking of that, if we're not thinking in those terms, then we can misinterpret the thing. Okay? Here's one where I think this is probably in your book somewhere too. This has to do with the proverb. The righteous man maintains continual regard for the life of his animal, but the compassions of the wicked are cruel. So you take care of your little puppy. You don't kick the dog, and you don't beat up on the cat. I keep remembering that. She wakes me up too loud. Now, the question, though, that I'm raising in this issue is, what would this have to do with anything with the covenant? Let's look at that translation. It's not a bad translation, so it's not a translation issue. What in that would imply something about covenant?
Would it be in some way that an animal reminds him of the covenant?
It could remind him of a specific thing. That could. I mentioned that later on. In other words, in the Mosaic covenant, there's a statement about feeding the plowing animal or whatever it is.
I mean, even the sacrifice of the animals.
Mm-hmm. But look at it. What does this mean here? How would you define this? A righteous person. I mean, this is the measuring rule, right? Standard right here. All right? Okay, so it needs definition. Where is the definition? What is a righteous person from the Hebrew perspective?
Someone follows the law.
The individual is rightly related to God because he or she is keeping the stipulations that God laid down within the covenant. That is a righteous person. Alright? See? Okay. So, right there, it's not on the front, so it doesn't say things like, in the covenant it said you should be nice to your donkey. So, righteous person takes care of his donkey. Now later on, of course, I'll mention this Deuteronomy passage, you shall not muzzle the ox while threshing, which is to say, if you're going to have it do work for you, you should feed it, right? Starve it to death while it's doing work for you. Okay? But the point is that I'm getting at here is just simply, look, righteous person, Hebrew hearing or reading that has to be reflecting upon what makes one righteous. Keeping the law, right? That's what it is. I have something else here too. I don't remember what it is. Oh yeah. This is the historical context. I really love this guy. First recorded in Revelation. First day of the 6th month, the 2nd year of the Persian king Darius. 522 to 46 month Hebrew equivalent to August 29, 520 BC. This is it. Okay, I can nail that down pretty easy. That's pretty good. Okay. Zechariah. So Haggai and Zechariah are somewhat related. That's why it's here. There. Let's see. Something else on this. Just a whole pile of historical data related to the time frame there that I don't need to go into right now. But the pile of historical data, which I think came from the guy who wrote the book.
Merrill.
Yeah. I think that's who it is, yeah. Okay, so at any rate, there is, even when you're just thinking in terms of contextual interpretation, you cannot ignore the background, what lies behind it. Okay, you got to deal with that. Okay. So, any questions on historical studies? So, when you get a narrative to do your exegetical paper on, one of the things that you need to do, of course, is figure out where in time does this occur and what's happening. Means that somehow it impinges upon what the world on, this passage has got to say, even if it's not on the surface, that might be behind. Okay, it might be implied, if you will. Okay. Now, we're going to do some of the stuff on term analysis. I don't know, let me ask you first. I don't know what level of term analysis you did with Dr. Stanley. So you tell me what you did. Okay, which one is that?
We used Arnold and Choi.
Let me see. Okay. I'm not going to put it. Right. Let me see, when was this? 2003. Okay, that's good. Yeah. So that's good, but my question now is, so that's got a good, let's see, where is that? Okay, let's see, I'm not familiar with this particular. Okay, let's see, so, good, that's good, okay. Okay, now the question is this, not just did you go through a good syntax book, which is what that is, did you do much syntax analysis?
We usually did every class, at least with the section we were covering in the syntax. He'd bring up several words that we
You ask questions, and as a class, we try to define the
classifying.
Okay. Did you analyze, like in a verse, did you analyze every term, every word?
we kind of translate around the table, and as we translate, he'd pick out a word or two or three out of the verse and parse it, and what kind of imperfect is it, what kind of adverb is it, that sort of thing.
Okay. It's good. It's good. The thing that we need to emphasize in this comprehensive model, okay, is that we analyze everything. Okay? It's a myth to say you only need to analyze the significant words. Why is that a myth?
You don't know if it's significant until you analyze it.
Yeah, if you don't look at it in a significant way, how do you know how significant it is? And let me ask you this. How often, and maybe you did, how often have you syntactically analyzed the vowel? Often?
Not often, but we did a few times.
Mm-hmm. You see, most people who would say only have to worry about the significant words would never choose a vowel to analyze.
It seemed like the words he picked for us to analyze were related to what we had read in the grammar that week.
That's good. No, that's good.
So the section when we dealt with Bob, we dealt with the Bobs and the passages we were.
Good. That's good. That's good. So you had a smattering of this and that, and so you got a little of everything. That's good. Okay, now you put it together, okay, and do it all, okay.
Yeah, we had to do that for the final, but besides that.
Yeah, but even that wasn't analyzed every term. It was picked by a message.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's good. That's certainly an effective way to do it. Okay. At this point, at this level, though, what we're saying is, look, everything needs to be analyzed. Not everything is going to show itself as highly significant for interpretation. Okay. But until you analyze it and know what it is, then you won't know that.
And if I remember right, in reading or somewhere, one of the things you say is that does, in a sense, become almost second nature. So as you read through, you don't have to stop and break out all the tools and look at that log and go through all the options, because you'll know and you'll see and you'll be able to already recognize.
You mean remember the categories you're saying and be able to just, right, sure. Mm-hmm. Right. But what we're saying is you not only need to do that, you need to record it. Mm-hmm. Okay, you need to record it. And be surprised how oftentimes you think you know something and then you say, I think I'll just check it. And all of a sudden, whoa, I got this one wrong. Okay. So, we're going to do some of this term analysis. It'll take us some time, but it's something that we need to make sure we do well. Here are just some bibliographical items. I don't remember if I've added more to it or not. One of the books, and I'll probably take note of the one you got there, because I'm not that familiar with that particular book. So, in fact, I'm not at all familiar with it, if I just okay. But very similar to that is this one by Ronald Williams, Hebrew Syntax and Outline. And I was looking at that from the standpoint of accessibility to the divisions, the breakouts. Looks like it's pretty good. Okay. So in this one here, Williams is good too. I think you can sharpen it up a little bit on that score, but it is accessible, good and accessible. But I like that one. Looks pretty good there too. I put a few others down here for you. Walt Key and O'Connor. I think I got yours on there. I think I got that on there for you. Mm-hmm. Right?
Walt Key,
yeah. That's one you said was pretty unreadable, is that right?
No, it's not unreadable. It's just so linguistic oriented. Okay, so it's linguistic terminology and stuff like that. So you've got to be kind of attuned to that to really grasp it somehow. Okay, but it has another value that some of these others don't have. That is Hebrew grammar. Let's just take the verb system. That's what he does a lot with there. The verb system, there's always been a question about the nature of the Hebrew verb, the aspect of nature. You have this outline that says on the one side, remember how it works? It's got simple, reflexive, causative, reflexive, things like that. On one side and the top. See, I can get out of the chart, a little chart again. Active, passive, and reflexive, and across the top you got simple, and you got intensive, and you got causative, and you got reflexive, causative, that kind of thing. Chart there. That's a model that has been used for years, trying to understand Hebrew verb. Okay? Well, Walkie and O'Connor come up with a new model. Okay? And that new model is everything, the whole system is causative. You got the chart there? Yeah, right. Active, passive, middle, causative. Okay, this is good.
I think they sourced Walkie and O'Connor.
Yeah, right. Because I was going to talk about. See, this is not typical for your typical traditional model here. Okay, this is not the traditional model. Traditional model would be no causation, be across the top. It would be simple, it would be intensive or passive or reflexive and then intensive. And here, you've got causation being the whole key. Okay, right? Mm-hmm. So PL, see, that's where the focus is on PL, that's walking Connor as the key there. The PL then would be cause bringing about a state, whereas Hipil bringing about an activity, action. Okay? Which is rather significant, makes a significant difference. Okay? And not only makes significant difference in the syntax analysis, but in the vocabulary, that is the meanings of the words. Okay? For instance, one of the problems that they were working with was how come we have a cal and a PL and they both mean the same thing? That don't make sense. Right? You never could figure that kind of thing out. Okay? So we'll call one intensive and just say kill. Okay, kill in the cal means to put to death apparently, but in the PL it means what? Kill intensively? I mean, cut up into little pieces. What are we talking about? Yeah, so they weren't satisfied with that. Okay, so when this other model comes out, and if it holds, if it begins to take over the thinking, because I've seen the new grammar books that have not taken that. In fact, that one there, I don't think, takes that new idea into account. Okay? But that syntax book appears to be doing that. If it takes over, then it'll adjust not only the syntax books, but also vocabulary issues. Okay? But anyway, that's just another thing. So it's a good, you need to stop. Oh. Okay. Okay, some of that other stuff. Okay. Now, term analysis, what we need to do is, of course, we need to parse everything. Okay. Parsing simply means what does it consist of, right? And maybe of only one thing, maybe an adverb, and that's it, or a conjunction, and there's nothing more to it. But it may be a little more exotic than that, okay? So we need to explain that, not only what it is, but how it relates to its context, obviously, and that's the syntax that we're talking about here. We talked about that before, okay? And it involves then various kinds of, it has various values for us, clarifies things for us, okay, and differentiates between interpretations. Obviously, a subjective as opposed to an objective idea is a different interpretation, or it can originate other valid interpretive options and viewpoints, okay, from the commentaries or translations. Okay? So it can do all of that for us. Let's see, I don't remember exactly which one I'm doing here. Oh, yeah. This is just an example of a problem, an Old Testament problem. This is an interesting problem, of course, the sons of God and the daughters of man. Okay. But this particular article, I just bring it out at this point because it says, notice, I don't know if you can even read this. Where is that? Let's see what I think is here.
Below it. Just below it. You can zoom.
Oh, zoom. Oh, this thing here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Many interpretations have been put forward to which this word, B'nai Ha-Elohim, the sons of God, is a specific group of people. Okay? That's one interpretation. In other words, not what we're talking about here is dealing with particular words and the particular syntax of those words that come up with different interpretations of that. Okay. One commentator, where are we at here? Some commentators hold that indicates the righteous sons of Seth. Okay. While others, sinful daughters of Cain. These other ones, sinful daughters of Cain. There's other interpretations that grow out of this analysis here. But here's the point. All these interpretations assign the designation of these words to a group of human beings, and they're all unsatisfactory. In other words, they all got problems with it, right? Okay. So then he's going to go into the details of this and say, look, the details of this is where we end up with all these different interpretations. Okay. So, how you analyze not only the connotations or denotations of particular words, but the relationship between the two, okay, is where you come up with different interpretations. Okay? That's what we need to be able to do. Okay. I'm saying that every term needs to be analyzed to some level. Okay? Not everybody says that, of course. You can be wrong. That's okay. This is a free country. Vote Democrat if you want. Just kidding. That's not on paper. Okay. Notice this particular example here. And this is an easy example in our English Bibles. If you can see this even in our English Bibles. The real prayer of Jabez. Of course, we know what the unreal prayer of Jabez is, I guess. He makes a lot of money with that. King James Version. David is more honorable than his brothers. His mother called his name Jabez, saying, because I bore him with sorrow. And Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, Lord, thou wouldest bless me indeed, and Lord is my coast, that thine hand might be with me. Thou wouldest keep me from evil, that it may not grieve me. And that you would keep me from evil, that I may not cause pain. Notice, King James, that it may not grieve me. New King James, that I may not cause pain. There's two different things there. Okay, right? Okay. Two different issues. So, it reflects two interpretations of the Hebrew infinitive construct here. Okay, with the suffix. The suffix could be an objective genitive. Therefore, you get that it may not grieve me. Okay, or a subjective genitive. Therefore, you get so that I don't cause pain. See, that I don't be the one to cause the grief, if you will. Okay? Or the third possibility, that the author was being intentionally ambiguous. So that both can be read into the text. Okay? And then you have to determine that. So at least, given just the syntax possibilities, you see, you got at least 3 viable options here. Okay? Objective genitive, subjective genitive, or both. Okay? And the context hat, you have to determine the real or the most probable interpretation by examining the context. Okay? My interpretation of that was that, in fact, both of them were meant. Okay? Seems to be most logical here. I won't go into all the details of that. Okay? But the point I just simply want to make here is, look, if we didn't analyze that and just went with one of the translations, right, or even 2 of them that differ, okay, we may not come down to the ultimate possibility of intentional ambiguity here, okay, and both of them being involved. In that case, he didn't want to have the problem cause him problems, and he didn't want to cause problems for anybody else, and therefore living his namesake, which is this guy's really a pain. Imagine giving birth and saying, I'm going to name him. This guy's got real pain.
Yeah.
No run girl.
This is one of the aspects of the process wherein we can legitimately say there is some tedium to this. Okay? It can be tedious. Okay, that's for sure.
I'm quoting on that one.
Huh?
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, write that one down for sure. Okay. And sometimes you come away and shit, I'm working on this for an hour and I didn't find anything significant here. Actually, even if that's true, you have found something very significant. And that is you analyze the possibilities and you come away convinced as to the meaning of the text. Not just, I think I know what it means because it sounds like I know it means what it sounds like. No, now it's what it sounds like, I know what it means that because I've analyzed the possibilities, you see. So you come away more convinced, even though it's just seems like tedium, okay? So that can happen, and it does happen, okay? Okay, now here's the thing. I don't know if Steve went into, Dr. Stanley went into this for you or not, okay? When you come to a finite verb, okay, these are the things you need to analyze. You need a theme, particularly the Nephel, especially the Nephel. Okay? Because the Nephel has significant distinguishing features about it that the others don't. Colorative and other kind of ideas. Okay?
I don't remember the word theme.
Okay, you don't use the word some people. Okay, all right. PL, that's what we're talking about with theme. I don't know what he calls it there.
Oh.
I'll let you look later.
Yeah. Right. But different grammars use different terminology, and that's part of the problem. And that's also part of the problem when it comes to defining, and what kind of a genitive. And you have different names for things.
Mm-hmm.
Every grammarian likes to create his own little list, it seems like, and so you got all kinds of names that are different names, but all mean the same thing a lot of times. So, at any rate, the theme, what we're calling, is like Nephel, Cal, whatever. Now, most of the time you have a Cal imperfect. You don't have to do anything with Cal. I mean, it's just a simple, statement. Okay. PL, you might want to do something with a PL if, in fact, you saw that the state issue was the fact. Okay. Nephel, yeah, you always want to look at the Nephel. Could be passive, could be reflexive, could be middle, could be tolerative, those kind of things. Right? When it's perfect or imperfect aspects, you need to do that. In other words, what kind of, okay, so perfect. What kind of perfect is this? Right, what kind of imperfect? Is it past, present, or future? Is it futuristic? Is it, what is it? Okay? Iterative, whatever. Okay? So you always want to deal with that. Okay? The mood, well, it's imperative, obviously. You got a command, some other kind of imperative, coordinate, just so they all have different breakdowns. Okay? So that's what you want to deal with. Okay? So we had a Cal perfect. What would we analyze? Let's say first common singular. Well, we would analyze the perfect. We wouldn't worry about the Cal, right? It'd be perfect. Okay? We would have to analyze the first singular or common because we know what that is and it's self-evident. Right? Unless there was a conjectural problem and you didn't know who the I was, who the pronoun referred to. That's rarely the case. Okay? Could be the case in some process, but mood, if it's in a mood other than, of course, the perfect or imperfect always looks like an imperfect, it seems like some of the time. Imperative, coordinative, they can have, coordinative, not necessarily so. It's just a beat, it can look like an imperfect a lot of times. Okay? But if it's a mood other than, an indicative, so to speak, right, then you have to analyze it. Nouns, you only want to analyze the case of a noun. Remember the issue of case. He mentions case in there. Now, technically, they don't have case in Hebrew syntax, but for the purposes of simplicity, they always always function some way in a sentence. In case, as I have a quotation, I think you have from Lofty and O'Connor, they say that this system of case provides a convenient framework for studying the use of the nouns in Hebrew. So they'll use the word case, even though technically speaking, you don't have a case. Okay? You don't worry about the technicality. But you want to deal with the noun. So as he deals with there, you got a nominative, genitive, accusative, and many others. Three deal with. Apposition. Apposition is a big issue in this, as you probably well know, because that's one way of having adjectival ideas. So you don't have a whole lot of adjectives in this language, but you have a lot of ways to get an adjectival idea across. Right? The genitive is one case, and apposition is another issue. Number is as applicable. Sometimes the dual number, for instance, might be dual, but really is only functioning as a plural. Another instance, the dual might be functioning as two, as a dual. Okay? For instance, Hashemayim, that's a dual form. Is that dual, speaking of two heavens or something? No, it's just functioning as a plural, idiomatically, if you will. Okay? So sometimes the number would be significant. Okay? When it comes to verbal noun, that is infinitive, construct infinitives, you got to deal with that. Absolute infinitive, functions of that, participles. And each of these can function in some ways as nouns, so to speak, and so as substantive, and so then if they're functioning as a substantive, they probably then have a function in the sentence that is equivalent to what a noun would do, and therefore have case. Pronouns. What type of a pronoun is it? That's important. And so, in the case of a pronoun, it's important because simply they're taking the place of nouns, and that's what you do with nouns. You look at the case. Okay? In the case of the suffix pronouns, well, suffix pronouns are attached to a noun is going to be a genitive. Attached to a verb, it might be an accusative. Right? And seeing identification is always important, and we kind of tend to forget that. And yet that really is significant to figure out who we're talking about, to always know who we're talking about. Okay? And it's not always that evident sometimes. Adjective, well, the general functions of adjectives are what? Attributive, predicate, substantive, or adverbial. Sometimes adjectives function as adverbs. Comparison, there's 4 degrees of comparison. You might only think of terms of 3. But there's positive, there's what? Positive degree. Huh? The good, better, best model. Good, comparative, superlative. There's another one that sometimes used called elated. It's kind of an elevated, that doesn't quite hit the supreme level of superlative. Okay. So degrees are important. Adverbs are a type of adverb of some sort. They're either manner, degree, emphasis, something. Temporal adverb, some sort of adverb. And sometimes you need to analyze where in the world this thing is, what it's modifying. In fact, when you do the diagram, you'll be forced to ask the question, right? Because sometimes it's a little unclear. Articles have functions. You went through articles, didn't you? Okay, so those are important functions. Prepositional phrases. Okay. Well, when they're prefixed to a substantive, there's one syntactical function. Right? A bait on the word earth means on the earth, there's only one syntactical function, and that's place, right? Okay. You don't have two, even though the word earth would be genitive. You wouldn't try to find another kind of a genitive other than place. Okay. Independent prepositions, but related to the substantive, it's the same thing. Okay. Same issue. For a prepositional phrase, is one syntactic function for it. Okay. Conjunctions is either consecutive or conjunctive. What do I mean by consecutive? Because there's different terms that people use for this.
The verb that makes things, this happened and then this happened and then this happened.
Verb with the verb consecutive, right? As opposed to conjunctive. Of course, it means and, right, and but, and some other things. But also can be, if it's not a verb consecutive, it could be introducing purpose clause, some other kind of clause, result clause, concessive clause. So, general functions are either hypotactic or paratactic. What is the difference? What do these words mean? This is my terminology that I got from other people, but I don't know if you know. Hypotactic clauses,
Subordinate.
Hypotactic, subordinate clause. Paratactic, coordinating clause or independent clause, if you will. Okay, so there are, in other words, these conjunctions are going to introduce either a hypotactic or paratactic clause. Right? If it's a clause. Sometimes just a couple of words together. Specific function, coordinating, a purpose, etc., etc. There's a lot of those possibilities. So, look at a chart, at least that I have, where I show different kinds of possibilities. I'll share a word. It's always an interesting word to deal with. It's not even... In fact, the the Libronics, I think, calls this thing a conjunction. It's okay. It has a conjunction feature to it, if you will. Technically, it's particle relation, and it can be used in many different ways, as we know. Okay. It can be a pronoun, it can be an adverbial function, and so we need to kind of deal with that. Okay. I'm not going to deal with that just yet. We don't want to open up my chart that I use just to show you. Let's see where am I here. Classes. Use syntax. Okay, here's my syntax outline. Let's see, it's smaller here. It's kind of what I use when I'm doing exegetical work, so I can have it in front of me, just kind of vary. Number, nominative, genitive, very similar to what you've got. Accusative, apposition, a lot of functions there. Articles, adjectives, pronouns, different kinds of pronouns. Okay. Here's I'll share a word. Okay. Relative, noun, result, purposive, recitative, causative, conditional. Okay. Nifl functions. I put the cal functions there. They're pretty standard, and they don't change much. Or the PL, issues not so much in a particular syntactical variation as the nature of the stem or theme itself. Okay. Perfect. Here's my breakdown list of perfect options here. There's not as many in that book, I noticed. Okay. And the imperfect has non-modal and modal functions, both. And it didn't look like there was that many in your book there. 12. Jussive, imperatives, cohortives, infinite absolutes, construct, various option participles, clauses, various kinds of clauses. Okay, so that's one list that I use. And then another one that I use is this one right here. It's for conjunctions. Now, did he deal very much with conjunctions in that book?
Yeah, there's
Whole section on conjunctions.
yeah,
And
section.
prepositions. Because this is both conjunctions and prepositions.
Yeah, I think you had them all in the particles chapter.
Particles, yep, prepositions,
Yeah,
adverbs,
right. Some call it.
Conjunction.
Yeah, right.
particles of
There's a
existence,
vowel here.
non-existence.
Okay, that's good. Okay. So then this whole list of, in fact, do it this way. It's easy to see. So, list of all these conjunctions and the prepositions. Whole pile of prepositions. We did with prepositions in the particle section there. Okay, good. That's good. Yeah, that's it. Okay.
18 of them.
There's too many to memorize, isn't there? But if you see something like the word, and if you like familiarize yourself, then you begin to catch a feel for this thing. But there's a whole pile of stuff here. Okay, so usually I just keep that when I'm working, I just keep that down here and I'm just have it in front of me, so that I can be referring to it, when I'm doing my exegetical work. Okay, so now let me show you what we're going to do is, we can get started tonight. I will show you just some examples of where my this kind of thing occurred. Okay, well, not I have. And then actually we're going to do it in Psalms 1. We're actually going to go through it and analyze Psalm 1 text. Okay? Yeah, we're ready to go there. Let's look at what it looks like in Genesis here. We're not going to do that today. We'll do that probably not. Now, notice. Just going to pick out a few things here, just to see how this looks. Viomer, okay. It's a cal, preterite, third masculine, singular. Preterite is the terminology used in the Vak, and Exegesis involved that it deals with historical tracking of the historical scenario, right? Sequencing things. I don't know what he uses.
We use preterite, didn't we?
Oh, did you use preterite?
Standard.
I don't think it was in the book. I think it was what Dr. Stanley.
Okay. That would be terminology I think that Walking will kind of use. That would be terminology that Williams uses. But that's kind of the standard, becoming the standard terminology for that with our consecutive attacks. So what we needed to analyze, not cal, we need to analyze the so-called imperfect, call it a preterite, which means, of course, past time, what that means. This is what that is, historical. Third masculine singular, we don't need to analyze that. We need to just make some statement about the vav, because that's attached, isn't it? So, vav consecutive, and you know what that is. So we can just simply answer. Noun, masculine, nominative, singular. I don't spell these out, but I try to spell out the other stuff. So I hadn't done that in the past, and I kind of forgot what my abbreviations were. It's kind of dumb. Spend all this time working on this, and then you don't even know what it means. 2 weeks later, you forgot your abbreviations. We have to have a list for abbreviations. That's stupid. Anyway, even in our old age, we learn stuff. Are you saying we need to take a break?
No, let's press on.
Okay, so I got a noun. So I declared the part of speech here. And that's always important because you'd be surprised every now and then you don't know what part of speech it is. Sometimes it sounds like a noun and it may well be an adjective, right? Or it sounds like an adjective and it really is a noun, you see, right? A substantive of some sort in Hebrew. And this becomes a subject, nominative, that's one of our categories, and therefore it's a subject of the verb here. Now, let's say. Preposition, indirect object, that's pretty standard. And then here, when it comes down to this, I don't try to, I've got it parsed as a noun and a masculine genitive singular, okay? But I don't try to give it a genitive interpretation, that is syntax, because it's related to the preposition. So if I analyze it at the preposition level, I'm not going to change my mind at the object of the preposition level. So it's got to be the same. So I just simply point it back. And if I haven't done it up here, then I'll wave it down here. Okay. And here we got Cal. We don't have to do anything with that. But imperative, we do have to do with. See, remember the list? In the imperatives, you deal with, if it's a mood other than the, so-called indicative, you deal with the imperative. So that's what that is, command. Second masculine singular. Okay. And these facts, in fact, these, in the parsing of these, even look the same. It might confuse you right off if you kind of, what part of speech we've got here. It looks like a preposition plus a pronoun there, and this is a preposition plus a pronoun there. That's what it looks like, right? So, sometimes you think you know what it is, and then you don't know. So there it is. Okay. Then we got a personal pronoun. Here is a pronoun. Now the pronoun is your primary word, just like a noun in a prepositional phrase would be a primary word. The preposition defines the function of the noun, is what's happening there. So the pronoun comes first, and it's a personal pronoun. That's the kind of pronoun it is. Masculine, genitive, singular, and all genitives following all words following prepositions are in the genitive case, just like all the constructs are genitive. That is, after there's constructs are genitive, etc. Okay? And antecedent would be, well, who is it? Well, in this case, it happens to be Abram, so we don't have a problem with that. And I also got, notice, always in Hebrew, it seems like, you got words attached. Here's a word with three words. You got a preposition, a noun, and a pronoun. Okay? Can't be simple like Greek. Just separate them all and deal with them individually. So I've got to do with two things here. I've got to do with this pronoun. Then I put for me, it works for me if you put a colon or a comma or a semicolon. Then deal with the next part of speech, which is a preposition. In my case, I'm saying it's kind of a reference. A long reference. Or in this case, some call that, instead of using the word reference, they use what? I forget the terminology, but some other grammar used now.
Not reflexive.
No, there is a reflexive concept, but that's different. Good. With respect, then I try to give it a translation, you'll notice, that reflects the syntax. See? Where we often make a mistake is we give a nice syntactical statement to something, but then we don't let the translation reflect it. Okay? We need to coordinate it. Okay? So even though it don't sound like nice, smooth English, frankly, we're not working on our English is really not the issue here, is it? It's the Hebrew here is the issue, and we want to try to see how our English can communicate the Hebrew idea. Right? May not make a good translation, for reading in public or something, but at least it helps us to focus attention on it all, on meaning and the syntax. Here we've got three. We've got a noun, genitive, singular. I know it's genitive because it's following a preposition. And I got the personal pronoun would be the secondary word there. Masculine, genitive, singular. And of course, attached to a noun, it would be a construct noun, so it's in genitive, you see. And that's to be a possession, your land. And then a preposition, source, from your land. Right? Interpretation. Okay? See how this is going? Okay. Now, early on in the game, you're constantly looking up on preposition. How is mean used? How is the name carefully. Okay, we're now there are only a dozen of them. Which one I'm going to choose? Yeah. Which one seems to make sense? Yeah, this one works. It makes sense. Okay, that one. You go and do it all the time. After a while, you begin to get a feel for some of this, so you don't have to look it all up all the time. Okay? Right? Okay. And something like this. Now we've got your land, from your land, right? Now we got from your kindred. Now, obviously, the preposition is going to be the same. And so is the pronoun, syntactically. I mean, they're not going to be different. Okay, so that speeds up the process. Okay. And here we get it again. From the house of your father. You see, you really have to work hard to make the prepositions really different here. I mean, you really have to have some justification, and it's going to be hard to find here. Okay? The only difference that's clearly different is your father, as opposed, which is different from your kindred or your land. Okay, it's a little different. Okay, so that kind of speeds up the process. Let's see anything. Okay, we've got a noun, preposition. Let's see. We got a conjunction, a preposition, a noun, and a pronoun, all in one so-called word. Noun is your primary word, pronoun is your secondary word, preposition, third word, conjunctive is connected with everything. 4 words and 4 syntactical statements. And tie it together in a translation. Right?
What?
Huh?
Why would you do the... What's the difference in the conjunctive and the connective again? For the vowel?
Conjunctive.
Why would you... I just need a reminder. Oh, yeah, in consecutive.
The consecutive. No, the consecutive was up above. This is the consecutive here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see what I'm saying? Conjunction now, we're just coupling words together. Okay? Conjunctive.
I'll ask again later.
Huh?
I'll ask again later when I forget again.
Oh, that's okay. She'll remind you again. Yeah. Work as a team. That's it.
Might help me.
Okay, let's see. So let's see how this works. Let's see, another preposition to the land. In this case, I got it as measure. Right? That's one of the, how far kind of thing. So the terminology used for that. And syntax book I was using was measure. Okay. And then we got the first article that shows up here. See that article? And a noun. So, preposition, what kind of an article? Well, definiteness, the land. There's other possibilities for an article, but you got to look at the list and say, okay, what makes sense here, right? And is there any of this definiteness is your general, the one you start with, okay? Which is kind of the most broadest, general. The others become more specific, you see. So when you analyze that, you have to ask, are there anything in the context that makes us more specific? If not, you're back to the default, which is definiteness. Now here's our first relative pronoun, or particle of relation, functioning as a relative pronoun, translated as which. Okay. Actually, I missed something here. What did I miss on that? All of a sudden, I just missed something. Functioning as a relative pronoun. Tell me.
Antecedent.
Huh?
Antecedent.
No. Oh, yeah. Well, I can put the antecedents, of course. It simply follows that word there. I could, do that. But there's something even more significant.
You're talking about Sharon, right?
Yeah. it's functioning in a phenomenal sense. And therefore, we need to figure out something about its function, its case. Now, this brings up another issue, you see. I forgot to do this here, okay, right? Bad. But, see, I'm forced to do something with it when I did my diagram. You've got to put it somewhere. It's got to function someplace. Just figure out where I put that thing. Let's say, which, okay, says a direct object. So there's an object. These are two objects here. Right? I will show you, which is really almost functioning here as an indirect object, what? So what? Right? So there's an object. We'll talk about the diagram and model I got here for you tomorrow sometime probably. Okay? But see, there I'm forced to make a statement about its function. Right? See, this is checking myself, if you will. One checks the other. So the diagramming and the syntax really work together. Okay? Right? In fact, what I do